Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I have my special guest, the Norm.
I'm back.
Norm's back. Today, we're doing a recap of the Tournament of Bourbons. It's a little whiskey tasting we had about 2 weeks ago to crown a winner in a blind face-off between 8 bourbons. And today, we'll be revealing who won in that group setting, but we'll also be revealing Norm's favourite, because Norm is our token Norm.
I'm the token Norm?
Yeah, he's the token Norm.
The newbie.
So Norm is a self-professed whiskey liker, but not a whiskey geek. He enjoys a good whiskey, but he doesn't know that much about it, and he's happy to learn, but he wants to learn through tasting, and that is exactly what we're doing here today. So, bourbons. You had many bourbons?
That is American whiskey, is it not?
Old bourbon is American, not all American whiskey is bourbon.
Oh.
So yeah, kinda. It's an interesting thing. So bourbon has to qualify as being bourbon. It has to follow a few rules. The most prominent of which are it has to be made in America, has to use American oak, a fresh barrel that hasn't been used for anything else before, and it has to be made with at least 51% corn.
Mm.
And that's in what they call a mash bill. And this is actually something we talked very briefly about in our, what ended up only being 1 episode long mini-series of Whiskey 101. Remember we did that tasting about what is whiskey and what can be defined as whiskey? Well, as one of the differences between Canadian and American whiskey is not actually the ingredients, but how it's made. Both countries use a lot of corn and a decent amount of rye and wheat and malted barley. That's the 4 main grains that they'll use. In Canada, what they do is they distill them separately and then age them separately and then blend them at the end. And that's how you get like a traditional Canadian-style whiskey. In America, the blending of the grains happens at the very beginning. They make a mash bill, the beer, basically, of the mixed grains.
Oh.
And then they age them together. Which ends up with a very interesting difference. I mean, one of the differences is in rye, for example. When rye gets mixed into a mash bill, it's not actually a strong flavour. One of the reasons that Canadian rye is often referred to as rye is because rye has a strong flavour in it, but it's not actually a large ingredient portion. If you use rye as a flavouring at the blending process at the end, you only need 10-20% rye to actually give it a strong rye flavour. If you put the rye in at the beginning, like in American whiskey, you need at least 50% rye to give it a strong rye flavour. Interesting, right? So these are all bourbons. I've not thrown in any weird curveballs in here. Then there's not any bourbon-adjacent things. There's not any things that are called bourbon in some places but not in others. Like Jack Daniels, for example. Tennessee whiskey, by law in Canada, is defined as a bourbon made in Tennessee. So in Canada, Jack Daniels is definitely a bourbon. These all say bourbon on the bottle. And I know there's Canadian whiskies that say BRBN, and you can pronounce it bourbon, but it's not actually a bourbon because you're not allowed to call it bourbon. None of that rubbish either. These are all actual American bourbons, and they're all, I think, as far as we can tell, I think they're all actually from different distilleries as well, which is really hard to do for bourbons, because a lot of bourbon brands are all made in the same place. Like, Jim Beam's a great example. Jim Beam, you've probably heard of, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of the top-selling whiskies in the world, along with, of course, Jack Daniels, Jameson, and Johnny Walker. To be successful, start your whiskey brand with a J. There's a top tip for you.
Genius.
Yeah, that doesn't start with a J.
Oh.
Genius with a J. That could be a good whiskey brand, though. But yeah, no. So Jim Beam also has... they have Old Grandad. That's made at Jim Beam. They have... I'm blanking. What's the one? Booker's. They've got Booker's. They've got Baker's. They've got Basil Hayden's. So there's a lot of Beam products that look like they're actually separate brands, but they're all made at the same place, and that happens a lot with a lot of different distilleries. So I've tried my best. I think we don't have any duplicates in here. But how this works for those of you who haven't played along with one of these whiskey games in the past is it's bracketology, and I'll flash up the brackets right now. So we don't know what any of the... Well, I do. Norm doesn't know, and you guys don't know what any of these whiskies are yet. As they get eliminated, we will reveal what they were. And we'll narrow it down until we finally have a winner. And, then we'll all celebrate in what is officially the best bourbon, according to Norm. And that's one of the things... I hate those... I mean... admittedly, I'll probably put a slightly clickbaity name into this one, but I hate those clickbait YouTube videos of the world's best bourbon. What's bourbon's best? There is no best bourbon. Like, every single whiskey, there's at least one person who that is their favorite whiskey. Right?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if your favorite whiskey is the same as everyone else's. The only way to find out what is the best bourbon for you is to go out and taste a few bourbons and see which one jams with you. And it will change day to day as well. If we did this again tomorrow, Norm probably might not pick the same one because he's in a different mood.
Exactly.
The weather's different. He's had something else to eat. What do you have for lunch? That chicken sandwich, wasn't it?
Chicken sandwich.
So we're going to find out what is the best bourbon on a Thursday afternoon after eating a chicken sandwich if you are Norm, the IT guy at the Strath. That is our goal today.
All right.
And let's find out. So, whiskey number 1 versus whiskey number 2.
Ooh. Number 2 has a strong nose for me.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Coming from a Scottish whiskey background, the one thing I've always struggled with bourbons is there's not as much diverse flavours. I find bourbons to be much more similar to each other than Scottish whiskies. There's an interesting note on number 2 that I can't quite put words to. I want to say like cedar or something. Yeah, it's something almost gin-esque in number 2.
Number 1.
Number 1 goes forward?
Yeah, number 2 is a little strong for me.
Fair enough. All right, so let's find out what whiskey number 2 was. So knocked out in the first round is, and funny that you say it's a little strong for you, this is a whiskey that I shouldn't pick up by the cork because I almost dropped it and spilled it everywhere. Wild Turkey Rare Breed.
Wild Turkey. I've heard of Wild Turkey.
Yeah, it's a standard. It's been around for a fairly decent amount of time, but it's 58.4% alcohol, so that's probably why you were finding it a little on the stronger side. I just realised I was smelling them. I didn't even taste the bloody things. Oh yeah, that does pack a punch, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's minty as well on the aftertaste.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, number 1's a lot softer. All right, so yeah, Wild Turkey Rare Breed. So I've found a couple of little stats for this one. Owned by Campari. It is a blend of 6, 8, and 12-year-old whiskies, apparently. And the mash bill is 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% barley. So you'll almost always find barley in the mash bill because you need some of the enzymes that comes in malted barley to kickstart the fermentation. So that's kind of a key thing. And you usually have at least 5%. 13% rye, 75% corn. That's kind of I would say, a medium sort of level of rye. There's no wheat whatsoever in this one, though. There's only a 3-grain blend. Yeah, it is a traditional style bourbon. It is made in Kentucky, in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. Good standard whiskey. And it is available. Everything in this video right now for about a week or 2 longer after this video launches is going to be 10% off. We do have some at the strathliquor.com for, let's have a look, normally $70.78, on sale 10% off, $63.70. And that is a good thing about bourbon compared to Scottish whiskey, is often the price as well, though. Mm-hmm. You can get a really good bourbon for not have to spend that much money. And I wouldn't be surprised today, honestly, knowing Norm's taste, I would not be surprised if Norm picks one of the couple of bourbons in here that are like really good value picks as well. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But yeah, solid whiskey. All right. So,
round 2.
Round 2. One has gone through. Who's going to join whiskey number 1? Ooh, there's a nice sort of fruity perfuminess on number 4 on the nose. Almost like foam bananas, you know, the candies.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a note I often get in Jack Daniels, actually. It's kind of a sharp gooseberry kind of a note as well. These were all organised at random. It's the same pairings as we had on the group tasting. But, yeah, we did randomise them. Hmm. 3 is just really approachable for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's soft, it's inviting. I can't actually remember what number 3 is right now. I might find out in a second. But it's very... if it's not got wheat in it, I'll be surprised. It feels soft and sort of almost like baked goods, pancakey kind of a taste.
Well, we're going to have to wait for 3 because it's going forward. 4...
4's knocked out?
Behind. Yeah.
All right. So whiskey number 4 has been eliminated, and that was another classic, Evan Williams. Come across that brand before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Bottled in bond.
Bottled in bond. So that is a designation in American whiskey, which means a couple of extra things have to apply to it. I don't know if it's still the case. It used to be that it was literally like locked away. It was bottled under government bondage.
Oh, really?
So that it had a higher amount of security, I guess, to make sure it wasn't being tampered with. It came about at a time when American whiskey had a bit of a bad reputation, and there was some real rubbish floating around, and people were getting sick from it as well. So this was a bunch of rules that were set into place to make a really good, high-quality, consistent product. Some of the ones that are still definitely around is it has to be bottled at exactly 50% alcohol, 100 proof. It's an easy thing to test without having like expensive equipment and things. I think that's how that became a standard. It also, I believe, has to be from a single season of growing as well, a single harvest.
Oh, really?
Which is kind of a unique one. I assume that's still the case. Yeah, actually, there's actually a write-up on Bottled and Bond on the side of this whiskey. How useful. Bottled and Bond status is earned by only meeting strict government standards, originally passed in 1897 to ensure quality and consistency. In accordance with these standards, this bourbon is 100 proof, aged for at least 4 years, and produced at a single distillery within a single distillation season. So it's not the growing season, it's the distillation season. My mistake. Yeah. Also, an interesting thing about this is that it is a sour mash as well. So it's not exactly the same style of whiskey as as things like Jack Daniel's, because it hasn't gone through the Lincoln County process, the charcoal filtering, but it has done part of the process. It is sour mashed, which is a bit like sourdough bread, you know? Yeah.
My favorite bread, by the way.
Favorite bread? Oh, nice.
Yes.
I will tell Kristen she's baked a lot of sourdough bread in the last couple of weeks. I'm sure you can
please.
Yeah. So this guy, amazingly, is $38.17.
Not bad.
Yeah, all right. Bloody good whiskey for $38.
For $38,
it's on sale right now for $34.35 while stocks last. And it is made at a distillery called Heaven Hill in Bernheim. The Bernheim Distillery at Heaven Hill in Louisville, Kentucky. And this one is 78% corn, 12% malt, and 12% rye. So actually very, very similar to the last one that got knocked out, isn't it? So the last one was 75, 13, 12. And this one is apparently 102% total, so I'm sure I got one of those numbers wrong. But yeah, it's a very similar recipe to whiskey number 2. All right. So
it says on the side here that this is the first distiller of bourbon in Kentucky.
Ah, nice. Classic. All right, so Evan Williams knocked out. Let's see who goes for 5 versus 6.
5 and 6. Oh, there's some color on the number 5 here.
Sure is.
Ooh. Oh, that is... I'm liking 5 right off the bat.
Yeah? I went for 6 first. It tastes very tea-esque.
Oh,
it's like having a...
That is really...
Oh, great.
As a rookie, I like it mild. You know, I don't like to be slapped in the face. And that is very inviting to me.
Yeah, very approachable. Soft sort of baking spices, like dark cherry, really sort of flavors that are very crowd-pleasing.
Oh, 6 is also very inviting. It's quite...
So is it going to be a hard round for you?
Yeah, these 2 are so far my favorites so far.
Nice.
getting a licorice or something like that. Is that a... I guess it's all... They're my notes, so I can say whatever I want.
Absolutely, and you will never be incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
Your experience with your whiskey is entirely yours, and no one can tell you otherwise.
Oh, this is so tough because I don't want to leave one behind because these are both really nice, but I think I'm going to leave 5 behind on this one.
Yeah.
And we're going to go with 6.
All right. I'm finding 5 to be... To try and draw at least one negative between them. I find 5 just a tad more tannic. And that's something that I'm sometimes in the mood for, but right now, I don't really want those sort of drying. You know what I mean by tannic? It's like red wine, where it like dries your mouth out. It's like peppery and that's
That's a good.
It's good.
Tannic. I didn't know. I learn something new every day.
So 5 left behind, 6 move forward.
Yeah, 5 left behind.
Whiskey number 5 was actually the runner-up.
Oh, really?
Previously, is Michter's.
Ooh.
All right, now what can I tell you about Michter's?
Oh, look at that label.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Michter's, it's one of those whiskies where it's not made... It's almost like an independently bottled whiskey, in a sense, in America. From what I understand, Michter's does own distilleries, but they're not making all of their whiskey yet. I think, and this might be incorrect, it's kind of hard to research. I think this whiskey, their bourbon, is made at the Willett Distillery, the Kentucky Bourbon Distillers Company, and it's an undisclosed mash bill. And that's because they don't want someone else going in and asking that distillery to make the same whiskey for them, which makes sense. So it's the 11 herbs and spices technique, where they're hiding what this is made with. But it's a gorgeous whiskey, it really is. I'm a big fan of the Michter's.
Yeah, I like that one.
And it is regularly $102.52 and is down to $92.27 on sale.
That's not bad.
Yeah, right?
That's not bad.
And for any Americans watching, we're in Canada, so these are Canadian dollars, and we're also in a province where the government doesn't want us to drink alcohol, or rather they do because they make a lot of money on it. If you're wondering why the price is higher than it is in Kentucky, for example. But yeah, great whiskey, great bourbon. All right. Final part of the first round, I guess, 7 versus 8. Probably
7.
The most different pair of whiskies.
This is very dark compared to the rest of them.
Probably the pair of whiskies that I'm more familiar with in this lineup as well.
This one has a very unique flavor compared to the rest of them, actually.
Good call. And that's because this whiskey actually does something completely different to the rest of them.
Yeah, that one has a very... I like it. Oh.
It was a runaway win for me on the day of the tasting. For me, it was a runaway win for number 7. Today, 8 is really catching my attention. It's a much harder decision for me personally today. Although I shouldn't be telling you this. I'm not trying to. I don't mean to try and sway your decision either way.
I'm going to go for number 7.
7 moves forward.
Just because it's a very unique.
Nice.
Compared to the rest. I haven't not drinking a lot of bourbons in my life, but this one is a lot different than the rest of them.
All right, so whiskey number 8 has been knocked out, and whiskey number 8 is one of the Jim Beam products. This is Old Tub.
I love it.
I know, yeah.
Unfiltered Old Tub.
Unfiltered Old Tub. Doesn't it just sound delicious? So this is a throwback bourbon from the Jim Beam portfolio where they are trying to mimic a bourbon from several decades ago. That's I think I've got that written down in my notes here. From 1892. So it's a style of whiskey from over 100 years ago. And it was nicknamed, the distillery was actually nicknamed Old Tub at the time because they had really, really big mash tubs, which is one of the pieces of equipment you need to make the mash, which, makes sense. It's a tub for mash. It's a mash tub. Solid whiskey, unfiltered. It's bottled in bond again, so all of those criteria that had to be reached with the other bottling bond that Bond the Evan Williams earlier. So it's 100 proof, 50% alcohol. It's 4 years old. It's from one season. Yeah, it's pretty glorious. It's a damn good whiskey. It is 75% corn, 13% rye, 12% barley, and if that sounds familiar, it's a very, very common mash bill. It's exactly the same as Rare Breed. But this one is not cask strength, whereas the Rare Breed was. This is a little bit less ABV. This is from Claremont, Kentucky, so another Kentucky straight bourbon. Yeah, solid whiskey.
Kentucky knows what they're doing, right?
They sure do. Yeah, they've been doing it for a while. And this one is normally $43.39 down to $39.05. So another fantastic bargain pick.
I love the American labels. It reminds me of the Old West, you know?
Yeah. It is a certain wonderful style, isn't it? The little line drawing on the back. It's pretty good. Yeah, Old Tub. Knocked out in the first round, but I think an honourable effort. It was certainly not disliked at all.
No.
All right, so round 2, the Blue Division. The semi-finals in the Blue Division.
So 1 against 3.
1 against 3.
You know, and it's funny because the more the tasting now, coming back to the first one, it tastes different than when I first tried it. Maybe because my mouth is now getting used to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you'd have just tasted these in the reverse order, you might have a different winner.
Exactly. Yeah. It's such a personal thing, right?
The beautiful complexity of whiskey. I'm getting a lot of pretzel on number 1.
I can see that. This one is tough.
It makes me want to have a hot dog. I love pretzel buns with hot dogs.
This one's really tough. I'm thinking I'm going to go for number 3.
3 goes forward?
And number 1 is staying behind.
3 on the nose. See if you can find this, because I just went for a nose there, and it strongly smells of peanuts right now.
Yeah, I can see that. I can smell that.
Yeah. Maybe we should put this on the menu in Big Bad's. Maybe it already is. And Big Bad John's is one of the bars that we have in our Strathcona complex here. It's a classic. It's been around for over 50 years. It's a hillbilly-themed bar where you get free peanuts, like in the shells, and you're supposed to throw the shells on the ground. There's a couple of videos that I've actually recorded on this channel in Big Bad John's. Mars has been closed. We should do one of these there. Actually, should have done this one there.
The bourbon would be perfect there, right?
It really would, wouldn't it?
It's the right atmosphere for this.
So 1 is out?
1 is out.
1 is out. 1 is actually the winner of the Group 1.
Oh, yeah. I hold my track record intact.
Eagle Rare. So Eagle Rare is a 10 years aged bourbon, which is really quite old for a bourbon. I generally like bourbons around 6. That's my sort of sweet spot for an age on a bourbon. I find it to get too tannic the older it gets. Eagle Rare does a good job at balancing that. This is from the Buffalo Trace Distillery. If you've come across Buffalo Trace before, this is part of a series of whiskies which are increasingly hard to find because collectors keep sweeping them up. And we sell the vast majority of our stocks of Eagle Rare in our store to American tourists.
Really?
Because in lots of parts of America, this is really hard to get, and you can only get it if you're willing to pay ridiculous amounts of money, either on the secondary market or at stores that are trying to take advantage of you. So, like, we had a customer in the other day who bought a case of this because where he's from, you can only get it if you're going to spend like $250 to $300 American. And here at the Strath, we've got it for $70.35 at regular price, and that's Canadian dollars. Right now it's 10% off at $63.32.
That's a quarter of the price for him.
Yeah, right? Exactly. So why not buy 6? Because he bought 6. Because a lot of people buy 6. We don't have much left, and it's one of those whiskies we have no idea if and when it's coming back. So yeah, I mean, get it while you can. It probably will be back, and if it does come back soon, we'll just stock up as much as we can, but there's never any guarantees. Yeah.
It's got the American Eagle on the front.
It sure does. So, yeah, this is, like I said, Buffalo Trace, and this is Buffalo Trace's mash bill number 1. They don't give you the exact breakdown, but it's around 5% malted barley and between 8 and 10% rye, I think. There's no wheat whatsoever in this one. Owned by a company called Sazerac. And it's a fun one because it's also the same recipe as a lot of other really popular ones. It's the same recipe as E.H. Taylor, which has exactly the same. We also often have E.H. Taylor. We've got it in right now. It's the same recipe as Buffalo Trace, and it's a very similar recipe to, and it's the same distillery as the famed Pappy Van Winkle, which is their super old wheated whiskey. It's the old version of Weller, and we've got some Weller as well right now. And I like Weller. I really like the wheated versions from Buffalo Trace. But honestly, I've had a couple of Pappies. It's not my thing. Like I said, I prefer younger whiskies. And the Pappy Van Winkles tend to be like 15, 16, 17 years old. They taste awful to me, personally. But they are really rare. They're really sought after. People pay thousands of dollars for them. Mm. But you don't need to, because you can get Eagle Rare for $70 right here at the Strath. Yeah.
I like it.
It's good whiskey. All right, so... Whiskey number 4 has made it to the... whiskey number 3 has made it to the final round. And now we have whiskey 6 versus 7.
Now, 6 has been my favorite in the last. It's like a vanilla smell to me.
Yeah, vanilla's a good call. And that's one of the notes that you get in Scotch whiskey if you're using American oak, or especially ex-bourbon barrels. But it's not a flavour I find hugely dominant in bourbons themselves. It's always there, but it's not the predominant flavour, because I find the tannins from the virgin oak actually kind of hides the flavours that are actually coming underneath that, such as the vanillins. And coconut is another one that I often get in ex-bourbon casks that I don't often find as much in bourbon. It's often there, but it's not as dominant.
I'm thinking... Well, this one is very unique. I'm going to have to go with this one because this one is very friendly to me.
6?
Yeah.
6 moves on, 7's out.
Yeah.
The unique one, it's... what's that phrase of something about like a tall flower getting cut down? Tall poppy syndrome. Yeah. Where the tall poppy gets cut down because it's too unique. It has to be cut in line with everyone else.
Yes.
All right, whiskey number 7 has been knocked out, and that is a favourite of mine, Boulder.
Boulder, love the name.
Boulder, from Boulder, Colorado.
Awesome.
Right? You don't have to be in the old country in Kentucky or anywhere down south to make bourbons. You can make bourbons anywhere in the States. Technically, Hawaii, you can make a bourbon. There's bourbons made in Washington. One of my personal favourite bourbons is made in Illinois, in Wheeling, Illinois, which is kind of weird. We've not been able to stock it for the last couple of years. I'm not sure what's going on there. Import issues, maybe. But yeah, Boulder, another favourite of mine. This is my sometimes favourite bourbon. And it's interesting because 9 times out of 10, when I'm looking for a bourbon to drink, I'm looking for something that's really easy, soft, approachable, and just enjoy it. Sat on a rocking chair on a porch overlooking your fields, kind of dram.
Yes.
I'm not looking for something that is deep, rich, complex, and contemplative. I don't want to get lost in the whiskey. I want the whiskey to be a friend rather than a challenge.
Yes.
This, to me, is not something I would reach for when I want a bourbon, but is something I would reach for if I want a single malt, but I want something a bit different. This is much more single malt experienced. And for that, first of all, it's finished in sherry casks. So it reaches all the laws and rules that you need to be a bourbon, and once it's done that, once it's spent X many years in a cask of virgin American oak, they change it and put it into a sherry cask to finish it off.
And that gives it the colour.
That gives it the colour and a little bit of a deeper, darker flavour, the stewed fruits, all of that.
Yes.
But it goes further than that. Boulder Spirits was actually started by a Scotsman and is distilled in a big old Forsyth's copper pot still from Scotland that he imported into Boulder. It's the biggest still in Boulder, in all Colorado. So they make basically Scottish-style bourbon, if such a thing were to exist. It's using Scottish distillation techniques in a Scottish still. And on top of that, I believe it's 45% malted barley. Basically about as much malted barley as you can get. 44, sorry, this actually says on the back. 44% malted barley, 51% corn, so the lowest possible amount of corn to still be called a bourbon, and then 5% rye to give it a bit of spice as well. So it's a high barley bourbon, which is fairly unique. There's not many distilleries that do that style. I, for one, think it's quite interesting. And yeah, as Norm mentioned, very different to everything else on the table here.
Yeah.
And today that was its detriment. And other days that could be what makes it win, I think.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Depending on what mood I am. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Super interesting bourbon. So this one is normally 132.09 with 10% off. It's 118.88. Yeah.
Not bad.
Which is, on the higher side for a bourbon these days, but on the lower side for a single malt.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah. Great whiskey. All right, so the finals.
The finals.
Woohoo! And a completely different finals to when we did this tasting live, which is I find very exciting. Because honestly, my favourite on the live tasting is still in play here today. Will Norm pick my favourite?
Oh, really? I really like 6. They're both very good.
They are. I mean, honestly, side by side, 6 is a bigger flavour. Mm-hmm. Much more rounded, much more complex.
Yeah. For me, 6 is the winner.
6 is the winner? All right. So, whiskey number 3. And this was what I picked. It's my favourite.
Oh, really?
For me, this is a very weirdly pleasing whiskey. And it's one of those whiskies which I feel bad for liking. Because it's a celebrity whiskey. This is Brothers Bond. And I've mentioned this on the... I've done a video on Brothers Bond before. This is a celebrity whiskey started by the actors that played the brothers in a TV show called Vampire Diaries.
Oh, really? Nice.
I tried this without knowing that. I tried this blind the first time I tried it. Thought it was a bloody good bourbon. And it's... Yeah. It doesn't need to be a celebrity whiskey for me. I think, personally, it gets marked down a little bit for being a celebrity whiskey, but it gets marked up again because how those celebrities actually went around getting this whiskey. Most of the time when you get a celebrity whiskey, it's either because they've got just shit tons of money and they just want to buy a distillery and slap the name on something, which happens quite often, or they just are doing it purely for a marketing exercise and just want their name on a bottle of something that's made by someone else and they don't really care what it is or how it's made or any of that. Like, Dwayne The Rock Johnson's got his crazy tequila now, Terramana. Casamigos as well by Clooney. There's so many celebrity spirits these days, and whiskey is part of that as well. In fact, Wild Turkey has got a celebrity in it, but I can't remember who. Is it Matthew McConaughey or someone? Anyway, Brothers Bond was started by Ian and Paul. I don't know your surnames, and frankly, Ian and Paul... to me, you're celebrities because you make a good whiskey, not because you're in a TV show I've never watched. So congratulations. You've got a new style of celebrityism now. This was actually curated by them from a third-party distiller that is famous for having ready-made, pre-made products that you can just sign up and buy a cask of and stick a label on it and off you go. These guys didn't go for one of their standard recipes. They commissioned their own recipe to be made by them. And I find that such a cool move, and I think it's a fantastic whiskey, probably because of that choice. So this is made at MGP, Midwest Grain Products, which is a huge factory, whiskey-making factory in Indiana, in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, funny enough. So it's there's shares a name with Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. And this version is, first of all, sour mash, which is cool. It's also 65% corn, 22% rye, and the rest made up with wheat and barley. On top of that, they've got custom-made casks where the staves have been charred to a number 4, and the heads, so the top and bottoms of the cask, have been only charred to a number 2 to give you a richness and complexity of flavour from 2 different char levels. It's bloody good. Like, it's a really good bourbon.
It is good.
Like, it makes no sense. It's a celebrity bourbon which is it's generally something I just disagree with, but it works. It works so well. So well done to the Vampire Brothers. This is normal price $75.57 down to $68.01. I very much recommend it. Gets Norm and Adam's seal of approval. And the next one is also admittedly very, very good. And I'm really, really happy for Norm, because I know you felt a little strange about trying so many great Irish whiskies last time and coming away with one of the lower priced ones. I'll tell you right now, you picked the most expensive today.
Oh, did I? Oh,
yeah. You got expensive taste when it comes to bourbon. This is a very cool one. It is Kentucky Owl, the Takumi edition.
Look at that label.
Right?
Love it.
This... Oh, I hadn't taken the foil off yet, but even the lid is cool. Look at that. Look at that cork top. It's embossed. So this is a special edition from Kentucky Owl, which is already a really sought-after high-value brand that was done with the head distiller of... it's the Japanese distillery which released a bunch of blended whiskies with their name backwards. Nagahama Distillery, which had released the whatever the backwards of Nagahama is. Amahagan, there we go. Nagahama. I feel like I'm having a stroke, Norm. And Nagahama Distillery, which releases Amahagan whiskey. Their master blender in charge of the Amahagan series actually went and did a collaboration here with Kentucky Owl, which is super cool. So it was Yahisa Yusuke, the Japanese master blender, worked together with John Rhee, the master blender of Kentucky Owl, to create this. So using Japanese blending techniques, which is designed to make a really soft, well-rounded, approachable flavor profile, simply from just blending techniques. They know how to basically shave off any rough edges. And yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you're looking for in a whiskey, right, Norm?
Yeah. The Japanese know exactly what they're doing with whiskeys. They do. Quite famous now at this point.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful wee whiskey. I think I've got a couple of stats about it. Let's have a look. There we go. So it's owned by the Stoli Group. So brought to you from the creators of Stolichnaya vodka. We think... so it's from an undisclosed distillery. However, there are a lot of clues to suggest that it might be made at Four Roses, because the master blender used to work at Four Roses. And yeah, I mean, that's... I think as much as we've got to go on, we don't really know where it's from. So this is the whiskey which it might possibly have been made the same place as one of the other ones on the table here. But we don't really know. But what we do know is that this is a 4, 5, 6, and 13-year-old blend. So they blended 4, 5, and 6-year-olds and some 13-year-old whiskies. And all of those whiskies have an undisclosed mash bill, but we do know that somewhere in there, all 4 of the major grains are there. Corn, of course, at least 51%, rye, wheat, and malted barley. Yeah, and they have their own distillery coming soon, but in the meantime, they are sourcing whiskey. I think this is great. I'm pretty happy. Final thing about this whiskey is that it is $199.91. Special price, $179.92. Hey.
Why not?
Treat yourself.
It's really good.
It is, and we've only got a couple of bottles left as well. So yeah, it's going to be on sale for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to put on the screen now who actually advanced in the live tasting. So, as you can see, Eagle Rare was the eventual winner, as we mentioned before. Michter's coming in second. Wild Turkey also got knocked out in the first round, but Brothers Bond got knocked out in the first round. Also, today's eventual winner, the Kentucky Owl, got knocked out in the first round.
Well, at least I hold steady with picking stuff that's been knocked out of the first round.
Yeah. And that, again, just goes to show that everyone's got their own palate, everyone's got their own impressions of all these whiskies. And yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Norm. It has been wonderful to have you. Well, we're planning to do a Canadian whiskey one next around Canada Day, so we'll have you back in the hot seat for a Canada whiskey face-off.
Ooh, I'm excited about that.
Are you going to wear your favourite hockey jersey? Do you have a hockey jersey?
No, I don't.
Probably got a Canadian band shirt you can wear or something. Though.
I can pull out. Yeah.
I've got a Bare Naked Ladies shirt. I'll wear that. All right.
I'm ready.
Thanks for joining. I've got a YouTube veteran here, so like and subscribe. And also like and subscribe Norm's channel.
Old games, old guy. If you like video games.
All right. See you next time.
Bye-bye.